Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Superman Returns, starring Brandon Routh, Kate Bosworth, and Kevin Spacey, and directed by Bryan Singer. Now, how do you think I got this shirt? Well, I'm not going to explain it. So, I remember going to movie theaters for this, and I remember being excited for it at the same time too. What do I think of it? Well, let's get into it. It's been 5 years and Superman disappeared, and Lex Luthor, played by Kevin Spacey, is out of prison and takes care of an elderly lady who's dying, and as she passes away, he takes everything from that family of hers and takes off with Kitty, played by Parker Posey. Like Blade Trinity, what is she doing here? I do like Kevin Spacey's take on Lex Luthor, but unfortunately, it it does not save the movie for me. And as for Parker Posey, she's miscast here. Martha Kent sees an asteroid and finds Clark Kent, played by Brandon Routh. And my problem with him is he doesn't pull out the charisma like Christopher Reeve does in those earlier movies. Meanwhile, Lex goes to Superman's home to steal crystals, and we get a cameo from Marlon Brando's Jor-El for a brief scene, despite how he was dead when this movie was filmed, and came out to theaters. And I did like his brief cameo. Clark goes back to Metropolis, to the Daily Planet, to work and to find Jimmy Olsen, and works again for Perry White, played by Frank Langella this time, and finds Lois Lane, played by Kate Bosworth, wins a Pulitzer Prize to an article called "Why the World Doesn't Need Superman," as she was upset and moves on from Superman leaving. And my problem with Kate Bosworth is she plays too young as Lois Lane compared to Margot Kidder, and Lex creates an earthquake blackout and gets the airplane Lois is on down to a baseball field, thanks to Superman saving the plane's life. And the score in this movie was very distracting, particularly Superman's theme throughout the movie. Perry realizes, as everyone does, that Superman's back, and Clark meets Lois' son Jason and her, I guess, fiance? It's never said. Richard White, played by James Marsden, and this is a good reason why he left Cyclops and X-Men 3 in order to do this movie. And the thing is, he's too bland in this movie. But I like the kid for what he'll do later in the film. I have to confess, I don't like Superman's uniform this time. It makes him look bulky. This is a 2.5 hour long movie, and the pacing made this movie very boring and dragged quite a bit. Like, I know Lex stole something at a museum, while Kitty pretends to, in a fake kind of way, that the brakes in the car were out, and Clark is on blackouts while Lois is confronted by Superman, and she writes about him and was bored out of my mind. And these are not the best actors to portray what Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder did back in the day. Meanwhile, Superman, next scene you know, figures out the crystals were stolen, and Lois visits Lex after she picks up Jason and doesn't know it's Lex until she sees him, which I found really funny. Just the way how the kid says, "You're bald." Sounds familiar. I like the scene on the boat when Lois asks Lex about the blackouts, and the way Kevin Spacey plays that scene, he's very good here, and it's a shame what he's going through now, but he worked great for me in this scene, and this is the best scene in the movie for me, in my opinion. Then Jason pushes the piano like how Superman does, and I did like that, but one question, is he Superman's son? Again, it's never said, and it bothers me. Superman saves Metropolis and goes to Lex's Crystal Mountain, and Superman realizes it's kryptonite, and Lex stabs him with a crystal with his friends and are beating him up, and Kitty feels guilty about it, and Jason and Lois gets trapped at the boat before Superman gets beat up, and Lois decides to go get him after he saved theirs plus Richard's life, and they get him out on the plane, and Superman goes back to stop Lex and throws the giant rock in the sky, and he falls down and knocked out, and they get him in the hospital, and he gets out all healed, while Lex is stuck on an island with a kitty ready to eat the Pomeranian dog. And I thought, "Aw, poor doggy." And Superman flies and sees his son, maybe, and says goodnight to both Jason and Lois as he flies and smiles at the camera. And that climax was fine, but not that great. I was bored and glad there was no more other than the DC Universe, which I've already reviewed. You can find those on the older shows. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 2.2 out of 10. This movie was absolutely boring with characters that aren't as caring as the originals, except for Lex Luthor. I feel like Kevin Spacey is a better Lex Luthor than Jesse Eisenberg in the future movies, in my opinion. And the actors are not great in their roles, and there's things I questioned here, I asked, but is never said throughout the movie, and that's a big disappointment from the first Superman movie I saw in theaters. So I will say this now. I've already reviewed the DC Expanded Universe movies, but I will watch them before I go to Birds of Prey. And I would like to thank you guys for joining me for the Superman series. And there won't be any more DC until we get to Birds of Prey. And until then, up and away.